Welcome to the English 403B Weekly Starter for the March 9th, 2015. Today's Weekly Starter is going to be an introduction to the novel that you'll be beginning this week, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Let's first look at the calendar. As you can see, today, Monday, 3/9/15, this is a great day to catch up. If you are all caught up, I strongly suggest that you start the novel here, if you haven't already. As you can see, Tuesday you'll be finishing up Unit 2 with the Unit 2 test. Also, then on Wednesday you will start the first session for Pride and Prejudice and continue that each day. It's really key that you follow the schedule in the lessons for the readings, and that will give you a guide as to how many chapters and what pages you need to be reading. All right, so today's objective. By the end of the session, I want you to be able to identify and apply important background elements and key tips in order to successfully read and analyze Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. So let's start and look at this great novel. The first thing that you need to know is Pride and Prejudice takes place in England. And we have numerous settings that are given as well as homes. And I want to give you some background so that you can see and picture these. So if you can see here, most of our action takes place here in Hertfordshire. This is where Longbourn is and the town of Meryton. We also have Netherfield, which is Bingley's residence. Longbourn is the Bennet's house, and a lot of the action takes place here, particularly the beginning action. We also will have down in Kent, Rosines that we'll visit, and then all the way up to Derbyshire, there'll be, this is where Pemberley is. So you can see the distance there. And here's London at the hub there. All right, so some things to know about Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. That before you read, Jane Austen is a satirist in this novel. So she writes firmly with her tongue in her cheek. She uses exaggeration and sarcasm, but it's all in good fun. It's all humorous. Even when she's being critical, there's still elements of humor. It's not this dark satire. She often is trying to criticize and illuminate particular people or groups. She disguises criticism of intended target by clothing it in humorous language, funny characterizations, and sarcasm. Austen satirizes Mrs. Bennet, for example, and her need to marry her daughters, and the whole idea of marrying for money and the society. But Jane Austen's also very well aware that this is an essential element of her society. So she is not denying that this is an important element, but the obsession of it. She also satirizes Mr. Collins' high opinion of himself, which often makes him the laughingstock of society. So if you look really carefully and read really carefully, you'll see some really great jokes and see how funny Austen can be. As you're reading, you'll notice that Austen's narrative style is called free and direct discourse. What this means is that we have a third-person perspective to convey ideas and thoughts from a point of view, but it's of a particular character. Usually it's going to be Elizabeth Bennet, but she doesn't tell you that that's who we're seeing the perspective of. So I want you to ask yourself, is this novel was originally titled First Impressions. So how might seeing through Elizabeth Bennet's point of view, not telling us that it's her point of view, and seeing her decisions help illuminate and help strengthen Austen's themes about first impressions? The other element to consider is, why does Austen want it hard to determine the objectivity of ideas? And this is a precursor of stream of consciousness. Another element of Pride and Prejudice is it's called a comedy of manners. What this means is that it uses elements of satire to ridicule or expose behaviors, manners, flaws, and morals of members of the middle or upper classes. Now, something to recognize is that while Mr. Darcy certainly is much wealthier than Elizabeth Bennet, they are of the same class. Some students get confused by this and think that the Bennets are of a lower class, and that's not the case at all. The difference is Darcy is of a better family, and he also makes a lot more money. So that's where this is all in the upper classes. We aren't looking at the aristocracy, but looking at the upper echelons of society. A comedy of manners also incorporates love affairs, witty and comical exchanges between characters, and the humorous revelation of societal scandals and intrigues. We often have witty banter between characters, and you'll see that with Elizabeth and Darcy. It's often that witty banter that shows that characters are right for each other and that they are of equal intellectual abilities. Okay, so to close the starter, what I want to do is look at the opening of the novel and point out some key things to look for. As you close through the first 3 chapters, pay particular attention to dialogue, but also the narration that Austen offers. Her narration reveals the assumptions of the culture, and like I said before, often will be Elizabeth Bennet's own views. Let's, for example, look at the famous opening line of the novel. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Notice these superlatives. Truth universally acknowledged, and it must be in want of a wife. So this means every single person in the entire world recognizes this, which of course immediately makes it false because nobody believes everything. And then also assuming that this man believes this. So immediately Austen begins with this satire and this humorous element. The question we as readers need to ask ourselves is whose opinions are being shared here. She starts as this third-person narrative, and yet really we're seeing a reflection of culture, we're seeing a reflection of certain characters. Which character do you think is believing this as we continue looking at our close read? So here's the opening of the novel. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. However little known the feelings or views of such a man may be on his first entering a neighborhood, this truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered the rightful property of some one or other of their daughters. So immediately Austen deconstructs the first opening sentence, showing that it's really the surrounding families that believe this very silly notion that he is the property, particularly if he's a man of good means. And then we have this example become specific with Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. "My dear Mr. Bennet," said his lady to him one day, "have you heard that Netherfield Park is let at last?" Mr. Bennet replied that he had not. "But it is," returned she, "for Mrs. Long has just been here, and she told me all about it." Mr. Bennet made no answer. "Do you not want to know who has taken it?" cried his wife impatiently. "You want to tell me, and I have no objection to hearing it." This was invitation enough. Now you may think that this is a simple exchange, but so much is revealed in these few lines. We first see a lot about the marriage of Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, which is a reflection of marriages of this the late 18th century, early 19th century. We have a marriage of unequal partners, where Mrs. Bennet's views and her morals and her desires are very different. She talks a lot. Mr. Bennet makes no answer, as we can see here. And even through his silence, she interprets things that aren't there. He talks to her and she is completely oblivious of what he really is saying. When he says, "You want to tell me and I have no objection to hearing it," he really doesn't care about these things, and yet she still shares them with him. So we see immediately the first example of marriage in this novel and an unequal partnership. The other thing we can see is an element that Jane Austen uses to characterize, and that is how characters speak. If you'll notice, Mrs. Bennet uses superlatives, and she is excessive in her language. She talks about, "Mrs. Long has been here and told me all about it," and that superlative element is going to continue with Mrs. Bennet in that she isn't moderate in her speaking, so it shows her to be a silly character. So notice those elements as you look, and you'll be able to figure out who Austen truly believes are the more valuable characters in the novel. All right, so I hope that you absolutely love this novel. Look for those satire, look for the humor, enjoy it. Happy reading. Now you're going to go take the quiz and have a great week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.